Welcome to the Sedona Soul Sister Show, down to earth discussions on spirituality, metaphysics, paranormal, and healing topics. The Sedona Soul Sisters are the most trusted psychic mediums in Sedona, Arizona. We are Roz Reynolds, myself, Ivory Lanou, Terry Ann Russell, Robert Markham, and Anya Sophia, who will be joining us next month. Today's topic is, what is it? Inspiration.
Inspiration.
I keep getting those two confused, this one and the next one. Inspiration, which is a fun one, a very fun one. Um,
hmm
we'll just jump right into it. Robert, you were lovingly suggested this topic, and I think it's great for this time of year. So go for it. What do you want to say?
Oh my gosh. I do think it's a fun one. And you saw you had in the description, kind of moments in nature, seeing a snow-capped mountain or a sunset. It's a moment of awe. And so I feel like there's something inspiring about these things. And it's like, okay, what does that even mean? What's being inspired? What's doing the inspiring? And you might call it beauty or whatever. Language is very limiting in this way. It's very difficult for me to explain moments of awe, but during moments of inspiration, it feels like my mind is silenced. And kind of the same thing when I resonate with something. And so I think part of the theme today is that, you know I think many individuals will say, well, it really resonates with me. I resonate with it. And I had a mechanical engineering background, and I studied resonance quite deeply, actually, in the study of vibration and mechanical equipment. And resonance has everything to do with energy. I mean, it's not even mystical. I mean, it's both. It's both. It's the energy of our bodies and our frequency. But this is very well studied, and you can even see there's like a video of a suspension bridge that's like making a wave. It was crazy. That was resonance, actually. And what ended up happening is the force of the winds or vibration from an earthquake on the bridge matched the natural frequency of the bridge, because science has shown us that everything actually has a frequency, has a natural frequency. And if an external force matches that frequency, resonance occurs, and there's this massive peak in amplitude. So it'd be like if you were listening to music and all of a sudden the music got really loud for a split second. It's like something amplified it, right? And I feel like when I'm inspired or when something resonates with me, there's this peak, and it's like life getting my attention. And it's funny, we talked about synchronicity 2 weeks ago, and it's like almost in the same ballpark of like, a little, hey, pay attention to this. And so when I resonate with something, my mind is silenced. And I think the cool thing about this and the way it, or when I have inspiration, my mind is silenced and resonate. And it does connect to spirituality and this resonance aspect and this energy aspect. However, like it leads me to like, there's a deeper knowing within, like whatever it is, it's tapping into something deeper. And, one more point on this is, you can barely capture the true awe of a mountain range with the best camera we have in the world, right? It's still nothing compared to being in person. There's something about it, almost like the presence of the range, the energy of it. And I think using words to explain inspiration, which we're going to try to do here, which is funny, using words to explain inspiration is a similar situation. It's like we can be the best cameras in the world, pat ourselves on the back, but inspiration and resonance is actually beyond language at the end of the day. So it'll be neat to see where we traverse here. Back to you.
I'm really happy to hear you say what you do as an engineering background about frequency, because we talk about that all the time on the show amongst ourselves, that it's what a lot of what we do and what we're about is scientific. And I think people will come to a place where they realize that sometime in the future. But for me, inspiration, when I think about that, I think about literally receiving information that makes me want to do something or have a great idea or pursue something that is just, I receive that information it can, in various ways. Sometimes, like, I think about inspiration, like I've had a lot from the angels through the years. And there was a period of time I was singing with a band, and I wanted to do a different kind of music on a CD, and they really wanted to keep doing like very upbeat Celtic music, which I love too, don't get me wrong. But I was having these dreams where I would receive the literally lyrics and music, and I would get up and run to my piano and write this music as fast as I could, and then I'd call somebody, have you ever heard this tune before? And I'd sing it to them, or I'd say, have you ever heard these words in a song before? And they're like all mystified. Why? What is this? I'm like, well, I just want to make sure it's new. It's not something that I'm dreaming that I've heard before. I didn't tell them I was dreaming it. But most of my solo CD is songs that I received that way, and that's definitely inspiration because I wouldn't have written those songs otherwise. So, things too like when you're writing, I'm a writer, Terry Ann's a writer, and you are inspired. You can be thinking about what do I want to call my book, and then something comes to your mind and you're like, yes, that is it. Or an idea, I know I'm supposed to write something, but what is it? And then you get the inspiration for what that's going to be. So I think of it more like creative endeavors, I guess, but it can also be business related, about your family,
Mm.
just sudden information that encourages you to do something. Go ahead, Terry Ann.
Yeah, that goes back to everything again that we always talk about: frequency, vibration, that resonance that Robert was talking about, that visceral feeling we get in our body. I'm very clairsentient, so I get a visceral feeling when something's coming in, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to pay attention to this, right?
Mm.
And you were talking about receiving that information. I think one of my most profound inspirations and teachers is my son in spirit. Not that I ever thought I would be sitting here saying that, but today I can sit here and say that he is truly one of my most inspirational teachers. And the inspiration that comes in, and when I channeled the first book, all of that, my ego was involved and I can't do it and all this stuff, but the inspiration that was coming in and the messages that I was to share, you can ignore that for so long, and then you come to a point where you're like, okay, this is real, this is what I got to do, right? Like you were talking about your music. So always angels and guides and my son in spirit. We all have different ways that we intuit information, right? So some of us may see, hear, feel, know, or just understand. And so when we get in touch with that inner space, right, that's why we always talk about too the importance of spending that time in prayer and meditation, because through that experience, when we're able to quiet that mind, those messages come through and we can have that inspiration to go forward.
Great point. Great point.
There's a very weird sound coming through that sounds like no one's talking, but there's like a squealy noise. Is anyone hearing that on their end? It's not here in my house, so just making you aware in case you know what it is.
I have heard
Sometimes we
a
just have
couple,
mystery noises. Who knows?
yeah, I've heard
Could
a
be a
couple of little
Zoom thing.
feedback or
Yeah,
something.
a little bit of feedback, squealing kind of
Mm.
sound. Yeah, I just
Oh,
heard it.
see, I just heard it now when you
Yeah,
just talked.
yeah. So anyway, the other thing I've had inspiration about has been like epiphany moments. And the biggest one I can think of, it makes me laugh every time. I mean, I saw spirit, angels, talk to them my whole life, far back as I can remember. But I never thought of myself as a medium. And people even asked me when I started doing paranormal investigations and I would sense things and know things. They're like, oh, are you a medium? No, no, I'm a sensitive. Now I think being a sensitive means you're not ready to admit you're a medium. Anyway, I was sitting in my house in Cave Creek at the time and I was watching Long Island Medium. And my boyfriend at the time was there with me. We were watching that together. We were both interested. And she's talking about her childhood. And she's talking about some things that happened to her. And he looks at me and he's like, Ivory, that sounds like your childhood. And I swear, literally, it was like a thunderbolt hit me, and this golden glow of light and rays went out. And I sat there stunned. Oh my God, I'm a medium. How did I not, how could I not know that? And I laugh about it now, but that's how inspiration comes sometimes. And I find myself telling clients a lot that if you didn't know something, don't beat yourself up, because my angels finally told me, Ivory, that was when you were supposed to know. That was when you were supposed to realize it. And I was finally in a position to do what I needed to do. I mean, I'd been doing my spiritual work secretly as I was head of mental health for this county. I was doing it by the phone, not under my own name, not under using my picture, because I wanted to keep my career. So when I left there and I came over here, and they're like, you have to do your work with using your actual face, your name. And I was very nervous about that. But I was able to, like, I was free. It was just me. I didn't have anybody to take into consideration. So that inspired me. That was like, it freed me to step into that role that I had been told I was supposed to do, but I felt like it's like, okay, all right. And so I went out and I looked online for somebody who could mentor me to get me ready to do it professionally, and she ended up being 1.5 miles away from my house. Suzanne Wilson, who was my mentor for mediumship. And it's just crazy. Like, that moment, like, everything changed. And that was one of the biggest moments of inspiration I can remember. Robert?
I think many of us have seen the movies, the Harry Potter movies. And what you reminded me of right there is I pictured Hagrid leaning in to you and saying, Harry. Yeah, it's like that moment.
You're a wizard.
Yeah, you're a wizard.
I'm definitely not a wizard. I'm not a wizard.
Yeah, that reminded me of something Roz and I talked to Roz about, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago, where, I was thinking about if I'm stepping into, like, really stepping into spiritual work, if you will, or energy work, or whatever one wants to call it, the mystical, the things difficult to explain. I looked at it as like taking on an identity. And then I think my greatest liberation, the moment of my greatest liberation, came when it was really, I recontextualized, it's really letting go of an identity. It wasn't so much taking on an identity, it's surrendering perhaps conditioning from the past. And it was like, whoa, if that's true, man, my ego really is cunning. It's like, it was really, really, really difficult to let go of maybe who we once were, what we thought was right. Like, maybe you're a mental health professional and you follow these stringent standards for diagnoses, etc. And maybe you wanted to experience your work with less limitation, the way I look at it, which is ultimately surrendering identity. Funny how it can be a circle like that. I wanted to say, there's like spirit with a little s and maybe spirit with a capital S. And then, because I think of like inspiration, the key word is spirit, right? I mean, that's what we're doing, inspire. And I think inject spirit into you. And it's like, well, there's big S and little s. What does that mean? I don't know, maybe that's something for a different time, but like, think about a football team, like, or a basketball team or something. They're out there playing, and you have like cheerleaders or the people watching it, their team spirit, and they're like coaching them on. They're like, yeah, go, you got this, And then I think the objective is for the team to feel valued and believed in and empowered, so that they'll try harder in a certain direction. And so it's almost like if someone inspires me, I say that they energize me. And, I keep tying this back to resonance because that's whatever, but they energize me. And maybe it is a pinging and creativity, like, at times too, like you talk about. But I want to say, it's like, I feel like inspiration are little moments where like spirit's injected into me. Maybe it's little s, spirit with a little s, but that could be ambiguous. But Roz, I see you got the hand up. What's up?
Like, we have to really come to a point when you're being called to do something, and you know within yourself that that's what you're supposed to be doing. And you can make all the excuses, and you can, find all the reasons to not go with that calling and that inspiration. But the bottom line is, I think when we're being called by our guidance, I don't know about a lot of other people, but in my case, it's not like they just go away.
Hmm.
It's not like they just stop. I mean, it's a nagging. I call it, a nagging and a pushing. And that inspiration and that feeling of almost like a compulsion, like, okay, I have to do this. Ivory, I chuckle when you talk about your book, because I mean, from the very moment I met you, you were on that book. You knew you had to do it. You couldn't figure out when to get the time. You couldn't, but you knew you had to do it. And I think when we feel called through inspiration, we feel compulsed to follow our guidance. You just got to go there. I mean, what are you going to do?
It's almost
They don't go away.
it's almost like I didn't choose it. It chose me, man. You know, those moments where it's like, I don't think you understand, you know, whatever it is, you could be an artist of some sort, whatever you're calling, you could be a mathematician. It's like, it's almost like, you know, it's like something chose you.
Exactly.
100%. It's a calling, like it is for a lot of people who work in the medical field, people who do humanitarian work. And I had a hard time with my parents. They had a hard time with me leaving my career in mental health when I was at the peak and very successful. And they felt like I threw away that last college education I got because I went back to school to do that. And I had a really hard time trying to explain to them that I'd been called to do this since I was 18. And I managed mental health, not, what was I going to say, a financial planning firm. I worked in radio for years. I worked in mental health for a long time. It was my longest career. But everything that I did, it was preparing me for what I do now. Roz and I've talked about this, I couldn't do what I'm doing now as well if I hadn't had experience doing talk shows and writing a marketing material and counseling people and managing a department, things like that prepared me because I think back to when Roz and I met. We've talked about this. We worked in a big center that was very tourist oriented, and we were friends. And I knew when I moved to Sedona that I would, as soon as possible, be opening my own business. And Roz, I found out, had her own office with a partner here in Sedona before. And the whole thing was like, I'd never owned a business, but I felt entirely confident that we would be successful, that I never really doubted that we had what it took or that we'd be able to make it work. And now we're going on 8 years into it. It blows my mind. A lot has happened in these years, but a lot of challenges, including COVID, but we were inspired individually and then together to open this business and stick with it. And it's been a lot of joy and a lot of wonderful moments too. That's all I wanted to say. I'll put my hand down. I always have trouble seeing that little tiny button. Here we go.
It's interesting because there's the word inspire, but also the word expire. and the details of the post you made for the show, there's a quote by a man named David Hawkins, who was actually, I think, quite well known in Sedona in the past, and interesting character, to say the least. And he had a quote that just, dang, it always stuck with me. It's we expire from lack of that which inspires. So I'm gonna have to dive into that, but I was just thinking, maybe there's inspiration radiating from something in some dimension, in some way, and it's constructive to the human spirit. And then there's things, conversely, that are destructive to the human spirit. And it's like, well, okay, that's all good and well, but what's important is how to tell the difference. And it's, I guess, like, the neat thing about this podcast is we're paying attention to it, and maybe the audience it's making them cogitate about these things. And It's like, okay, we're just developing an awareness of inspiration and asking those questions, because I don't know when we would want to, it just comes down to, it's very important what we give our attention to. Because if we're giving our attention to something that's ultimately destructive for our spirit, the will to be better, the good with a capital G, if you will. And I think at any given point, like, you can be in a conversation with someone and ask I'll speak for myself. At any given point, I can be in a conversation with somebody and I can ask, is this constructive or destructive? Unfortunately, it's very difficult to tell at any given point. In hindsight is 2020, but it's like, there's an awareness, there's a knowing in you that I will go weak. I can ask that question. I'm like, oh, it's almost like I smelled a food that I shouldn't eat. And it's like, apply kinesiology. It's like, maybe you don't have to do the muscle test with the arm. You can actually feel with enough awareness, if you want that, you can feel if something is making you go weak or strong, just like Hawkins muscle test. And it's like, okay, does that mean this is either inspiring me or expiring me, energizing me, de-energizing me, potentiating, amplifying my creative energy, right? To use the example you used earlier. And really, really interesting to start, especially for the sensitive individuals out there, like, very interesting to start mapping that out, and even mapping it out by person and place. Not all of us have the time and bandwidth of thought to do this, but I think there's something there, asking yourself, like, is this person constructive or destructive for me? And asking the spirit with a capital S within you to tell you. All right, I see you got your hand up, Ivory.
No, I mainly, I want to say I really appreciate what you bring to our discussions, because you've got an interesting background that fits so well with frequency discussions, and I like your very more scientific approach to it. It's good. I think that's going to help a lot of people connect, because it's very logical.
Mm.
Very and scientific based, but I think that's going to be really helpful. Roz, this is like a big topic for her, frequency and energy, and big part of
It's
her
all
work.
about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I'm thinking about what you're saying about, is it inspiring or expiring, and something, I don't want to go down too big of a side road here, but when you're in a conversation and you can tell, you can feel your frequency going down, your energy draining, that's not a good conversation. And sometimes there's whole topics it's better to just avoid. But if you get into a conversation and it's going on, it's already been discussed plenty, and you're feeling depleted, you're feeling like, I'm like Terry Ann, like, I'm such an empath, I'll start feeling pain in my solar plexus, and it's like someone sticking a knife in there and twisting it, and I'll just say, I think we've discussed this enough. Let's talk about something happier. And like yesterday, I had lunch with a good friend I hadn't seen in a while, and we were talking about something we used to do in the past, and she brought up something, and I started to say something. I said, nope, we've discussed this in the past, because I knew it was like going to bring us frequency down a little bit. And what's the point? We've already discussed that. So I think that even thinking about that, how it comes back on track for today's topic, is that if we can avoid lengthy conversations or revisiting conversations that are not good for us, topics that pull us down, or with people who can't discuss it, but they're going to argue it or get irate about it, then that is interfering with your clarity to receive inspiration. I get so much inspiration from my angels, which means I've got to keep my frequency up high, because, angelic frequency is way up here, and I've got to get and stay as high as I can possibly be to hear them and see them as clearly and as often as I want to and need to for myself and clients. So I see that as a protective thing I do so I can get inspiration. Go ahead, Robert.
Hey, I want to let Terry Ann go on ahead first, because
Oh, I didn't see that. Go ahead. So sorry.
no, I was up first, but my intuition says Terry Ann go
Okay.
on ahead.
I don't know. I might have forgot by now.
Oh no, I can go. I'm ready. I'm on deck.
Do you want to think about it a minute, Terry Ann?
Yeah, I got it. I
That's
got
fine.
this.
I do that.
So at some point, I'd like the privilege of talking more about yoga on the podcast, because that's I mean, it encompasses everything. It's one of the most spiritual. They call it the science of yoga, which is funny. You mentioned the scientific approach. They call it the science of yoga most of the times, and or not most of the time, but say the sages. Anyways, uh, there's a series of phrases or aphorisms in one of the yogic texts, ancient yogic texts, and essentially there's four of them, and the last one's what has to do with what you talked about. But I'm just going to mention the first three on the way there. It says, with the be friendly to the successful people. Be happy and friendly to successful people. It says, to the unhappy, show compassion. It says, to the virtuous, celebrate them, rejoice in the virtuous. And the last one is the biggest one for me. And I think it's so important because you talked about draining and is this draining me, etc. And what it says is, it says, do not oppose the wicked, avoid the wicked. And it's amazing. It's almost like getting trapped in a loop with somebody. And it can be a macro loop, like a weekly thing. It can be in one conversation, you're going circular. And I use the word wicked, but that's not really the right context for this. The right context is what you said. It's like draining. And it's like, don't oppose those who drain you. Don't try to like need them to change their mind about something. It's like avoid them. It's almost like wisdom. It's just like saying like avoid the wicked. Don't oppose them. I think many individuals, if they're seeking less suffering and a more joyful experience, and I mean, that's the good stuff. So I encourage anybody to seek that. You might be better off avoiding the wicked when you can, not opposing them. Terry Ann, did you remember? No.
Oh my God. You don't know how many times that's happened to me, but you guys didn't have anything to say, so I felt like I had to say something anyway.
Hey,
Now
I
you know
got
the truth.
I have another sort of another mini topic change within our topic here whenever you're ready.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, I was like, okay, there maybe I have a phrase that says follow the energy. And so those things that energize me and give me that sense of being alive and, that like, I was like, follow that. I think a man named Joseph Campbell, who was an expert on myth, really neat writings that he would write. He said, follow the bliss. That's another way to look at it. I have a phrase to take the risk and follow the bliss. So anyways, I was like, okay, follow the inspiration, right? Like you could say that sounds like a pretty good thing to do, follow the inspiration. But the problem is there are very sinister people that are super duper inspiring. And it's like, oh no. Like, let's look at a very famous one, Adolf Hitler at the top of the Third Reich, leading into World War II. He was incredibly inspiring, but he had some of the most sinister motives that we know of anyone ever in a position like that. And so, it begs the question, how do we tell the difference? Like, how do you tell the difference between good inspiration and bad inspiration?
Yeah.
What do you think, Rosalind? Something coming to mind?
I just totally agree with taking a real good look at that. And, putting yourself at a little point of separation from getting sucked in to some of these lower frequency intentions, thought processes, etc. I mean, sometimes you just have to kind of step back and let that go off on its own energy, and literally, I mean, release it and send it with light. So long.
And also maybe seek the counsel of someone from a spiritual perspective that you trust. I think all of us on here have had spiritual teachers or mentors in the past, and it's like seeking their counsel and being open with them. And of course, everybody on here is acting as a professional in this capacity as well through the Sedona Soul Sisters business. So you can always come seek our counsel. But I think the neat word I have for this is fallen angels. Like it's like people that have achieved great knowledge and higher spiritual attainment, perhaps could be considered enlightened by some or what have you. And then like Lucifer in the biblical story,
Yeah.
Lucifer, he fell. He was once a great angel. He was the most beautiful among the angels, but he fell, and then he uses his knowledge. He uses his knowledge of God, of the self. He uses this to turn away individuals from less suffering and more joy and towards their ruin. And so the word Luciferian is that it's somebody that's using, in my opinion, is somebody that's using spiritual knowledge and the good stuff to actually sow the seeds of your demise and ruin and time. And the worst of them are the most patient among them. And I think mind control, we talk about inspiration that's dangerous and sinister. And I think some very destructive cults have come into existence that we're aware of in the last century. And it's mind control, and they gain great influence using these seductive, they use seduction, but they use it using good stuff. Uh-oh. Hello?
We have a visitor. Do you need to
Thought I
check?
might have.
Oh,
Anyways,
that's funny.
I've talked long enough, but I the last point there is that how to tell the difference is that this is what I want to say really. How to tell the difference is, spiritual truth and love is all inclusive, and it doesn't hate anything. It maybe might seek to avoid something, or it's the absence of something. But I think when trying to figure out if something is good inspiration or bad, it's humility is a telltale sign. Messianic narcissists like Adolf Hitler did not have humility. So when trying to find spiritual truth or spiritually integrous teachers, I think humility and maybe not trying to control you or manipulate you, but just encouraging and inviting. All right, thank you for allowing me to rant. That's a topic I really like.
Totally agree with that. And I just want to say, like, as far as for me, when there's a lot of people out there talking, saying things who seem convincing speakers, and the first thing I do is tune into how it feels. How does that feel to me? And sometimes just that person's energy is so dark. Oh my gosh, the darkometer starts going off, and I don't. Then I have to turn them off. There's certain people I can't even look at them speaking because it hits me so hard. It doesn't matter what they're saying. And then if I feel like I'm not positive, I'll ask my angels, and they'll be very honest. And sometimes it surprises me, but most of the time it's what I thought, that there's something wrong there. There's an underlying agenda to what's being said, or out and out lies. But there's even things like, I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I knew the answer to this. But right before I left the office, I asked Roz a question, and she said, "Yes, you need to do that." And I already knew that. I just didn't want to know that. I didn't want to have to do that. But so I'm like, rah, 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 rah. As I drive away, I'm like, gosh darn it, I wanted her to say something totally different. Like, no, you don't need to do that. But I already knew, but I just needed to hear it because it was something I really didn't want to do. So, that's when having somebody you trust is so awesome, because my angels sometimes get annoyed with me if I ask them stuff that they know I already know. They don't like that. And they'll just be quiet. They'll just like go mute on me. So then I need to go to Roz or Terry Ann and, hey, can I just run this by you so I don't think I'm going nuts? But yeah, that's all I wanted to say was, for me, it's definitely a strong feeling as to a person's intentions and their message. Anything else you wanted to cover on that?
No.
Any other examples of inspiration? I mean, it's kind of hard off the top of your head, isn't it? Like thinking back on your lifetime, everything that's happened. I want to tell you, like, Robert, you were talking about like the big S and the little s, and what that made me think, I thought you were headed here, like there's big moments of inspiration and there's little moments of inspiration. And some of the little moments of inspiration is something I was talking about with one of the Sedona Soul Sisters last week. And that is that there's been times when my angels will tell me, like, I'm having a conversation with somebody I think is my friend or a family member, and they'll say, that person does not have your best interest at heart. That's literally the words they use. And I always be like, what? Like, that's what I'm thinking inside. I'm like, it startles me, and I'm sure that it halts my conversation a bit. And they look at me like, what's going on? But I'm not going to tell them that my angels just said that. They're telling me so that I'll know. They're telling me to wake me up, that I'm too trusting, and once again, I'm not thinking, the bad things about people, or seeing the signs that they are actively working against me in some way. And it's happened multiple times that my angels told me that. And to me, that's a little moment of inspiration that's really critical for me, so that I can back away emotionally, start making plans to like change that situation, which I've certainly had to do, because I'm not going to have somebody around me that's looking to hurt me in some way. We don't always see that. Things can be hidden from us. People can be very manipulative. So I think paying attention to those moments, and I've said it before, but when your angels talk to you, almost 100% of the time, you're going to hear that as a voice in your head. But if you're not thinking that, and like it startles you, that's not your thinking. You're not going to think something that startles you. Your mind leads you to that moment. So if you think like, where did that come from? Or what a weird thing to think, or you're just shocked, your angels are talking to you, and it behooves you to listen to that and heed what they're telling you, because they're trying to protect you with that kind of inspiration.
Right. Or even how you feel in your body, right? When you start the conversation with that person and you hear that or feel that, a lot of times, again, the ego kicks in, like you said, and it's like, no, that can't be right. You have to be wrong. And it is, when you take the blinders off, it can be very disillusioning to look at those things that we're being told. But when you trust the information that's coming through, and the information that's coming through is always from the our highest and best, right? For us, we have to learn how to decipher that information. Is that lower frequency information coming through, or is that higher frequency information coming through? And how do you know the difference? And for me, I have to say, one of the biggest lessons I had was after Anthony passed, and learning to discern that dark energy, those thoughts, I was hearing things that I knew were not good for me. So learning to discern that. And I think because I have the background that I have, I was able to understand that. But there's people that cannot understand that that's not them. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of what we teach, and I always tell my students this, is just because I'm telling you something and it's my belief, I want you to go within yourself, and I want you to check within yourself. Does that resonate with you? And you don't have to tell me, yes, it does. It doesn't matter to me. What I want from you is for you to be able to check within yourself. How are you intuiting that information? How does that feel to you if you hear something like that? And then when you learn to discern what the difference is, the further along you go, you're able to make those better choices sometimes without being so blindsided, right?
Mm.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to something Robert said. I remembered what I wanted to say before. And that is about this whole thing of complexity on like the country and the world scale right now. You made me think of that. I think that when we are trying to fight the dark, when we are out there arguing with people who clearly have dark thoughts and motivations and desires, we are absorbing some of that into ourselves, and it changes our frequency, it lowers our frequency. I have two good friends who, the last time I visited with them was during COVID, and they said they had told somebody, we don't want to talk about politics with anybody. It doesn't have anything to do with us. And I'm like, it doesn't have anything to do with you. And then she was saying, well, we're trying to just stay completely apart from that. And I thought, how can you do that? At that time, I was like, how can you do that? But I've thought differently since then, because I do think we waste a lot of energy, and we make our lives more complex with additional stress, strife. We're not going to convince other people. Do you think that people who are like that, do you think they're going to convince you to think the way they do? I know nobody can convince me of that. Nothing. No one. They've tried. It's not working. So that I know it's wasted breath, and so there's a lot of, we need to agree to disagree on that topic, or we cannot talk about this topic at all, because if it's going to devolve with them into nastiness and raging and say like verbal attacks on your belief system, that's not good for you. That is not good for you, and it's not accomplishing anything. And I think because of that, I've come to this place where I am avoiding that topic completely. I'm avoiding, especially with the people I know that can't have a civil discussion. And I am avoiding energies of people, like when I go out and I feel they're mentally ill, I feel they're chaotic, I feel underlying anger, I give them a wide berth because it feels like there's this hair trigger on people's emotions, a lot of them out there right now, and they can just go like that. And I don't want it to be on me. You know, I work really hard to stay on an even keel, to keep my serenity, and to keep focused on positive things. So instead of getting into these discussions that devolve into nastiness, find people that you can talk with about positive things. You've got to find a way to swim to the top of the chaos in the world right now, and you're going to float with other people. You're going to create this giant flotation device of people who want to focus
Hey
on
man,
the
I'm on the
good,
podcast.
people who want to find joy and happiness and want to better themselves. And you're going to hang on tight with them, and you're going to help each other survive this time. You know, we're all here for a reason. We're here. We must have volunteered to be here at this time, hard as that can believe, but we're here because this world needs more help than it has in a very long time. So we must have thought it was important enough to come here, and that's just another way you can simplify your life, by simplifying your mind a bit. Then that's where it always starts. Doesn't everything start within each of us? Can you
Yeah,
talk now, Robert?
I can. I have my good friend Mark here passing by. For those that know, Anya's partner, who Anya's going to be on here next month, Anya Sophia. So you won't be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. When you talk about avoiding these energies, you know, there's consequences for your anger, but you're the one suffering when you get angry. Don't mistake this. That's the whole nature of this experience. And I think when you do encounter somebody that is particularly angry or they're hateful and you feel that projected towards you, what that hate wants more than anything is to reproduce itself in you like a cancer. It wants to replicate itself in you. And so this is the miracle of forgiveness, in my opinion, is when it's almost like, you know, it's like the Archangel Michael, his shield just comes in front of you and blocks it. When you choose to forgive the person, even if you think that, you know, they really did something wrong. And it's really being on the lookout for that, in my opinion, like you said. And it's like in situations where you can't avoid it, it's like recognize that whatever it is in them, it can be actually a lot of times it can be guilt too, and shame, whatever it, and pride, whatever it is in them. One thing, its victory is to replicate itself in you. That's my opinion, but it's worked out well for me more often than not to seek forgiveness very quickly and to avoid, get out, you know. That's it.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a great discussion, and I'm sure that there's going to be some questions from this show. You've been watching the Sedona Soul Sister Show. If you'd like more information about us or our services, visit our website, sedonasoulsisters.com. Tune in next week. The topic is intentions, and that will be another pre-recorded show due to the holidays. So no live Zoom, but you can watch it on our YouTube channel. You can listen to it on any major podcast platform. So have a beautiful holiday, a Merry Christmas, and we will be back in the new year.